This is Scotty Reed of Black Talk Radio News, and joining me today is Mr. Marlon Adams of culturalgrassroots.com. Again, that website is culturalgrassroots.com. The reason we invited Mr. Adams back to do another video interview is the last interview that we did with him, he had informed us about the new rules that the Securities and Exchange Commission has issued on crowdfunding and how now people can be more than just donors to a business venture, but become investors through crowdfunding. So it's good to speak to you again, Mr. Adams. Happy New Year's to you.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Scotty. And please call me Marlon. You make me sound like an old dude.
All right. Okay. Well, Marlon.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Good to be here again.
The last time, that we spoke to you, and you said that these new rules that the Securities and Exchange Commission has issued could be a game changer in terms of obtaining capital to do business startups and projects of those sort. I think you called it historic, if I remember correctly. And so I have gotten some questions from some people on social media who watched that interview of us, and they seem to be quite skeptical. So that's why I wanted to bring you back so that you could further explain. Let me just give you an example of some of the skepticism. Some of the skepticism was that, well, this is just another way for the federal government to get into people's business or to somehow, make money off the people and whatnot. And so, people aren't trusting of the federal government in terms of these new Securities and Exchange Commission rules. So, I mean, can you just further give us detail on this?
Oh, absolutely. I haven't witnessed that kind of skepticism myself, and so I don't, I can't speak specifically to that, but I can speak to what I know about. The SEC, the new rules, the final rules that are still have a final comment period before they actually go into effect, but they have been adopted, and and they are historic and they're game changing if you choose to take advantage of them. The federal government, I don't know what kind of business people you could possibly be in. Where the federal government wasn't involved in some way. First and foremost, they get your taxes, and you got to report taxes and your activity pretty thoroughly. So I'm not sure where that's coming from, but be that as it may, I can tell you that this is a game changer as it relates to businesses that have as their focus the development of a business infrastructure that's rooted in the economy of our existence, right? That allows us to ascribe value to our goods and services and ideas. There has never been an opportunity to, number one, because the internet is so new, right? Number two, because you can now publicly go to the internet, this vast repository of personal lives and stories and ambitions and activism, and tell your story and have that internet, this vast repository of people, respond in any way they choose. So that's game. It's already, so in other words, innovation really is about taking what you have and doing something new with it. So the internet is there, and for us, this is an innovation. Not just us, obviously, but for the small business community, for any small group of like-minded people that have a goal that they think can resonate with other people that are sympathetic to their particular goals or in similar circumstances. This is a game changer in terms of its reach and its scope, but only if you decide to take advantage of it. So.
Now you mentioned something key there in terms of building infrastructure. At the end, I think it was on December the 30th, the one of the people I'm associated with, or I should say organization I'm associated with, it's called the Let's Buy Black 365 movement. Their website is letsbuyblack365.com. Now, one of the areas that they are working on is getting people to support Black businesses. Now, they also have a database of Black businesses that anybody can go and enter their business into. But that's just on the consumer side. And I do see the value in that in terms of recycling our dollars. We've heard Martin Luther King Jr. give speeches about that. We've heard Malcolm X give speeches about that. But that's just the consumer side of it. And so, but in terms of building an infrastructure, you need investors. And so I do see this as a game changer. So, I mean, what ways do you see that this benefits those Black businesses or those who are wanting to become Black entrepreneurs, which your website focuses on, culturalgrassroots.com?
Yeah, well, as you know, Scott, this is not a website that has attracted widespread attention in the Black community, particularly amongst people who are talking and espousing this whole notion of Black buy Black business. Okay, there's been quite a bit of work done around the issue of Black entrepreneurialism in America, and really, I think the jury is in that it's not a viable proposition to think that you're going to be in business and be in the same categories that are dominated by the mainstream culture, particularly as it relates to comfort and convenience, when you are, number one, primarily a dependent population. All of our money comes from the system itself, the mainstream population. We're employees by and large and particularly of federal, state, and local governments. That's our main source of employment. So as a dependent population, it's not viable to think that you're going to, go into business competing with other mainstream businesses. One of the things we promote on Cultural Grassroots is strategic entrepreneurialism. Much like the Chinese have been very strategic about the things that they compete at. Like if I'm in New York City, and I watched the Chinese, go from what their motto says, from humiliation to redemption. I mean, in just a few years, where you had Chinese individual Chinese merchants walking on the subway with homemade bags full of gum and candy that was bought wholesale, and selling it for $1. You don't see that anymore because the Chinese grocer stores, the small fruit, vegetable, and flower stands, have colonized all of Manhattan, not just the Black areas, but all of Manhattan. Much like and that's just a matter of extending your brand. But Chinese food is the best example of a strategic asset that they possess that's rooted in the economy of their existence, the food they eat. That's the essential part of your existence is, your culinary interest and taste and habits. They have happened to be assimilated into mainstream America in a way that makes it the Chinese store and the Chinese proprietor in those stores a ubiquitous feature of America. I think that's like the holy grail, if best you can expect in America, to be able to get to achieve that level of ubiquity throughout the economy. For Black folks, we have achieved a level of ubiquity in certain areas that do in fact make up a strategic asset of our own that, like Chinese food, only we do and are associated with. Number one, images and stories. Our images and our stories are, that's an authentic byproduct of our existence, and nobody should be able to do that better than we do it. And it's a strategic asset in that number one, it's something that we can have a competitive advantage in and dominate that business. And it's not a business that you have to recreate. It's a business that already has mainstream acceptance and widespread use, which is media. People are consuming images and stories on a regular basis as part of the way they learn, part of the way they envision the world, part of the way they envision their own lives. So this is a product that has worldwide use and acceptance that we can, and talking about, our lives, and from everything from living, as a subnational malcontent in America to being a country in the geopolitical world of competition where assets, strategic assets and resources and so on and so forth are what's being competed about, what's being vied for, what people are after, and what people are competing for. So there's a lot of great stories, and we have an opportunity, particularly with crowdfunding, to now take control of those stories, be the producers of those stories. And let me tell you, people are, kind of in the back of their mind and saying, yeah, okay, whatever, because the storytelling, they have assigned the job of storytelling to almost like God-like features and qualities. That's what God does. And that's what they really mean is that's what Hollywood does. And Hollywood's like a godlike creature that nobody really understands because, who are these people that create this magic? Who are these people that can have you crying in a dark theater with lots of people? Who, that's got to be magic. And I don't think, we appreciate the fact that these are creative minds with technical know-how that we ourselves are capable of, and that what they do is an essential part of how people understand the world.
Now, I understand that, you do have a background in film, being a film producer. Now, let's use that as an example. I have heard stories. I don't know how true they were because I didn't do any in-depth research, but I've just heard stories that, for example, actors like, we lost Mr. Adams. He'll be joining us back. All right, let's go ahead and add him back.
My fault.
Okay, we got you back,
yeah,
Mr. Adams.
My fault.
That's okay. Danny Glover. I've heard stories about Danny Glover wanting to make a film about the Haitian Revolution, but he was having difficulty in getting studios to greenlight his project. And I imagine you would know more than I would know. Greenlighting means what? Funding, right? Whether a studio would fund you or not. I've heard about Spike Lee wanting to make certain films, but were not able to make those films because he couldn't obtain the funding. So just using the example of film making, for example, and telling our own stories. So this is a way, and from what I understand, for them to take their project straight to the people. And not only would not the people, instead of just donating because they want to see this Black film made, now they become investors, and if it does well, if they're able to get the distribution, which they can even take advantage of online distribution, but they would then reap the profits that film would make. Did I lay that out right?
Yeah, there's a lot of promise in that. I think that so far, to my knowledge, a film project, the most money that a film project has been able to raise has been the Veronica Mars people who were, that when that series was canceled on TV, they went online to their friends and communities and fans and raised, I believe, let's say $15 million. Okay. So, $15 million you can do a lot with. I don't know if you can effectively recreate a period piece like the Haitian Revolution with that money, but you could probably get close if you're using Haitian talent. But yeah, I mean, I think but there's a lot of good storytelling that doesn't have to be as big and grand. For $15 million, I mean, I I would look at and consider, well, let me just back up because I'm getting into the woods there, but yeah, filmmaking and the crowd is a good mix, is a good match, because as I said, we can be the producers, we can be the people who say, okay, wow, that is a great story. It's about, and for me, I'm a futurist in all, and I'm a sort of a practicing amateur futurist, and all that really means is that I look at current scientific research into a lot of these transformative technologies, and I imagine what we're going to live like in 75 years or so. And I can tell you that I am the only cat doing that when it relates to black folks, because this is not the fantastic that you see with most science fiction. This is the plausible, right? This is almost like prototyping the future. This is what government think tanks do in terms of looking ahead, trying to prepare based on what knowledge we have about what we know in the sciences, what we know in the in biology and computer artificial intelligence and general and AI and computer human brain computer interface. That stuff is constantly and rapidly developing, and it is absolutely impacting who we are as a people, what we will be. And the stuff that I'm doing there we're very alone in trying to understand and use it as a way to inspire the next generation of innovative creators on our behalf. Because I tell you, when you look to the potential of that future and how accessible it is and how do-it-yourself it is. I mean, you could be a biogeneticist in a basement laboratory and come up with the next genetic fix that transforms how people receive information or process information or
developing clean energy, things like that.
The next solution to the environmental crisis that people say we're up against. So it's transformative in that way. But so yeah, we can, the crowdfunding piece as a producer, as we are the producers. Now, I have been thinking about how this would actually work, because one of the things that we have to consider, I think it would have to be the formation of a company. For instance, would have to be a sort of an entity that would handle the sale or distribution of the film itself, so that you can buy into that company, and it's put together for the sole purpose of selling the film. In other words, because the way films work, in essence, the crowd is paying for the film. So in some ways, that would eliminate the need to buy the film from the producer. You're right? Because the producer really is the crowd. So what the crowd has done really is hired a distribution sales entity to execute a plan to return money to the investors. Right. So let's say, for instance, Spike Lee goes to the crowd, as he did with The Blood of Jesus, the remake of Ganja and Hess. He raised about $1.4 million. And I'm not sure how he ultimately who he gave it to distribute. But let's use that as an example of a film that's crowdfunded. And the company comes to us and says, we want to make this film. Instead of so they give us a budget, we fund it. And so there's no purchase price to say, okay, here is $100,000, here is $1 million to buy the film from you for whatever the cost of making it was, because we've already paid for it. What this company is really being hired to do is distribute and sell it, right? So while Spike can still retain the copyright ownership of it, the distribution and sale of the film would belong to this company, just like any other deal he would enter into, right? And he can continue to get royalties like any other film he gets a hold to. So yeah, I'm thinking out loud about how ultimately it will work, because what we have to be careful of is funding films, number one, that are going to end up in the hands of one of the mainstream distributors. And you don't want to build an infrastructure, financing infrastructure, that gives the film away to the people who are building the infrastructure for distribution and sales and display. That means retailing.
Let me ask you this. I don't mean to interrupt. Let me ask you this. We've heard a lot about Tyler Perry having his own studios based in Atlanta. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to study his business model, but is he doing that, what you just stated, creating, producing the films, and then putting it into the hands of these other entities outside of the community?
Well, we are in the community of America, so as Black folks, what we're trying to do is to be, as part of that mix of this American community, we're trying to be more competitive, right? Because we're just not competitive in that mix. So what Tyler is doing essentially is taking the economy of our existence, our images and stories, but he's only taking, essentially, he's taking what he's taking, and a lot of people complain that the images and stories he's taking are ones that people, the mainstream culture, who has its own aspirations and view of itself, and particularly us, okay, that it wants to see or that it supports, and they buy that type of representation from him, so that his output gets dominated by the kind of films that people who will buy them, meaning the networks,
right,
want to see, and that limits you. Right, that puts us back where we start. What are they going to buy? Right? What kind of film are they going to buy? That's the kind of film we're going to make. What kind of film are they going to buy that they can then sell to Black people? That's always the question for us. With crowdfunding, it's not about what kind of film they want to buy to sell to Black people. It's kind of film the Black people want to see, because they're the ones funding it. So with Tyler Perry, I would imagine, like most deals in America, particularly in this business, which is a strategic asset that all governments hold and control. Hollywood is part of the government in sum and substance. It is. So what are they interested in? What type of stories they're interested in? Okay, we got what Tyler does, and the way they operate is like, okay, we'll front you the money. So I would suspect that Tyler Perry's studio is built on the output deals that he has with these mainstream studios, like Oprah's studio, which is probably funded by primarily, mainstream organizations and investors. BET, which is owned by Viacom.
Right.
What's the other one? One Television.
TV1.
TV1, which is owned by, I think, NBC, primarily. So, yeah, these people buy certain things and they enter into output deals. And that's with that output deal, particularly with Tyler, since he's on a couple of networks, he has a couple of series, which are, might be 22 episodes a season, which are, those are economic engines. That kind of deal will get you a studio. You can buy a studio with that, because the banks will lend you the money to do that. So I would suspect his deal is something like that, where he's doing output deals and they're paying up front. And, there's built-in profits, but that takes us right back to where we started. We're dependent on these mainstream entities. We're not doing the kind of images and stories that tell our story the way we want to tell it.
Let me interject something else there, going back to the technology, because I'm sure you probably heard of Hulu, which is on, I'm not sure if it's ABC, NBC, but it's one of the major media corporations. And that is how they did.
They're a combination of all those.
yeah. And they distribute what we would normally see on television and cable, where they offer it online.
Correct.
And they also offer movies. Then you got a Netflix and whatnot. I know at least one Black media producer. Shout out to Why You Mad Son, Cha Boogie, who is also in New York. But they make films and they put them out straight through Netflix and whatnot. But again, we could also be crowdfunding our own Netflix, that primarily focuses on the stories that we want to tell, and invite other media producers that tell those stories, to distribute. So what I'm saying is we could also be crowdfunding our own distribution networks instead of having to go through, the traditional sources.
Yeah, I think we're not there yet. in
Okay.
terms of the portals, because when
Right, but I'm forward thinking though. I'm just looking.
Oh no, yeah, you're on the right. We're all on the right track. I think it's what this. So Netflix, you can use Netflix, use it for what it's worth. You're not going to make a lot of money with Netflix. Some people like blackandsexy.tv, they have the model I think is the most viable model for black product. They're building toward being able to do exactly what you said. Blackandsexy.tv, run by some young folks, black folks out of California, and they focus on the interpersonal relationship dramas and comedies, dramedies, and they do very good work. Very natural aesthetic they have with us, the kind of images and stories you can support. Like, wow, okay, they get it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Hair is bigger than just hair. It's like, yo, it's like who are you emulating? Come on. You can't talk about black power and walk around, emulating other people. It's like, yo, so where's your power? You got to roll with it. You got to flaunt it. And so they made they have a very successful model there with that. And I support what they're doing 100%. And what they're doing now, they went from doing free stuff on YouTube to now doing, they built up a subscriber base so that on VHX, I believe it is, which is essentially a white label video on demand platform. So you can support blackandsexy.tv. You can support them directly, and so certainly they're paying a carriage fee, which you can't avoid, like being an internet connection. They're paying for that to VHX, and I'm not even sure what the deal looks like, but they are in control of, and to the extent that they're not in violation of VHX's rules, their own destiny in terms of product, because it's subscriber base. Now the model has its flaws only in that, number one, it's not a crazy amount of money. They're asking, I think, almost like $35, might be $60 a year, a lot more than Netflix is asking. Actually, Netflix is getting $8 a month, so that's what $96 a year. So a little less than Netflix, but they have far less in terms of what they're offering. It's like I said, it's one genre type stuff, the relationship drama, the melodies, melodramas, and so on and so forth. And it's mostly short films, mostly short form stuff. So but they have the right model. And maybe the VHX model and the whole production model that we're using is still costing too much to support what we're trying to do as a full-fledged business, because you don't want to have to rely on advertising, because then you're back to the same boat. You're back in the same boat again, letting the mainstream dictate what you produce.
Right.
So subscriber model that's the way we have to go. We need a bigger base as we possibly can get, so we can get some economies of scale. And how big is that base is really the question. How big does that base have to be? If it has to be all black people in America, then we're done. We'll never be able to do it. But like in cultural grassroots, I'm saying, well, let's start with 50,000. If we can start with 50,000 registrants, let's get that together and let's start to wield our power as 50,000 people who have said, yo, we're looking for black entrepreneurs, tinkerers, thinkers, and entrepreneurs who are ready to innovate on our behalf. And we want to support you with investment. And 50,000 people putting up $5 a year puts us at something like $3 million to play with.
Right.
It's like, okay. I mean, you can get a lot of startup stuff going with that.
Yeah, but when you first started Cultural Grassroots, it was still just asking for donors. It was crowdfunding. But now with we're bringing it back to the SEC rules, the new rules, it should become more attractive. The forward-thinking people.
Yeah, I would think this is the killer application, because I know in the back of most black people's mind, that from the blog posts, from the radio stuff we've done, people are still asking, well, I can't say that truthfully. I don't know what they're asking, because people are still on this internet thing, they still seem very anxious to follow behind some one individual, soothsayer, you know what I'm saying? Shaman, whoever it is, whether they still want to follow behind somebody. I mean, some guy was on the internet trying to raise money for a school, and it sounded interesting and all that, but he opened up more questions than he answered with that whole project, and he lost out big time trying to crowdfund that kind of thing. Couldn't raise it. It just showed how weak his support was in his effort. George Fraser, who is internet. Well, I don't know if he's internet so much, but he used to be a corporate guru where he bring a lot of corporate sponsorships to the table, and they do these gatherings of black folks wanting to move on up, and they used to fill up hotels and stuff. He went on the internet, tried to crowdfund, complete failure. So I don't know what the killer application is, what for black folks. I don't know what it is holding. So I'm talking about forward thinking black folks. I think and I've said this in couple of my articles on the blog. I think that we are just so unused to working together in terms of innovative, forward-thinking black folks. We're just so used to going it alone, and you know what I'm saying? Starting your own venture, and then getting support any way you can, which really generally means from mainstream society some kind of way. Yeah. The project might sound good, and but essentially it was supported by some mainstream organization where you could only do so much. But you know what I'm saying? It's like
you raised an interesting point. I don't mean to interrupt you. Before I forget, I was listening. I was actually participating in a conversation that was being had, and they were talking about affirmative action. And then they were also talking about, like businesses when they bid on providing services, let's say a construction business, and you tell them your plan on how you're going to do this. And the people I were talking to were saying that what they would do is when a black company would submit their plan and whatnot, they wouldn't end up getting awarded the contract. But then the people you submitted your whole project and plan on how to do whatever it is that, you were submitting to do, they then take that and give it to somebody else. Basically like stealing your intellectual property.
It is what it is. It ain't fair, but it's so. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there's that kind of corruption is what you're going to deal with in most systems where people are involved. But I think being held specifically hostage to those kind of programs, set asides and 51% deals and all that, you're already starting at a disadvantage. Those kind of things never act to empower your community. They act to employ the individual. And that's my point about our best and brightest have been so focused on what is going to get them to the top of the heap individually. And rightfully so. We have been so focused on succeeding in America at whatever it is we're doing, but that success has never been able to impact the systematic existence of our black brothers and sisters that come up behind us, or even our own family members. Our success is not transferable to anybody but ourselves as the best and brightest. You get a corporate job, your kid is not guaranteed to come behind you. You can look at the ranks of corporate America and see that. Ken Chenault has said that explicitly in meetings with people. I've heard talk of him talking explicitly about the notion that the pipeline does not exist for us. I'm one of three, and I'm still one of three, right? Corporate execs. So that notion that our best and brightest should strive for success in the Western context has done us a particular disservice, because we have not been able to invest them with the political education and understanding that would make them assets to our development as competitive, interdependent people, and not simply dependents.
Now, we started off again trying to address some of the, I guess you would say, skepticism, but we are talking about Title III of the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act And you have on the blog, which I'm going to share that blog with folks and whatnot now. So taking it back to this new rule. Now, you mentioned that they're taking comments on this new proposed rules that they have already adopted. What does that mean when they're taking comments on this?
Well, it's just a final commentary from the public. So they get they go through this process of talking to experts, getting the stakeholders' feedback, people who are using the rules, people who are making the rules out of the activities they're involved in, and they get a sense of what's best for the market, what's going to be fair, what's going to be open, transparent, and protecting what protects the public the best. And once they go through that process, they come up with those rules, and then they post them for everybody to look at again and say, okay, did we get it right? You have 90 days to give us your feedback on that. So we're at the final stages of that process where the final rules have been proposed, and they're saying, here's your final opportunity to tell us whether we got it right.
Okay. And is any of that process where anyone could go? How would we look at that?
The SEC. Just go to the SEC site and put in crowdfunding, and you'll take you right there.
Okay. Now, in terms of, again, addressing some of the criticisms or skepticism of surrounding this. Now, this would not really change the way businesses are run, right? They would still be submitting to the same rules that govern venture capitalism, would they not?
You have anything in particular in mind when you say that?
Well, when I say that, I'm talking about make sure people aren't being scammed and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, that's that has been the whole fear, but also it has been the sort of red herring that Wall Street uses to protect their monopoly on the ability to create money. Really, that's what you're doing. And to decide what's a worthy venture or not. Mm-hmm. So crowdfunding opens it up to the crowd to determine what's worthy. And the crowd, as it were, and it turns out, in most studies about crowdfunding and particularly crowdfunding and fraud, it turns out that the crowd is as smart as Wall Street or smarter at picking real winners and backing bona fide real businesses with people who are qualified to carry out the functions that they are crowdfunding them for. So, yeah, you're going to have fraud, and some people are going to get away with it for a minute. But that has not hindered the growth of capitalism throughout the world, although it's probably at this stage where fraud and all of the corruption that's in the system is going to transform capitalism into something else. We'll call it something else, but it won't be what we know today, as bald and raw as it is, and so open to corrupt influences that it is. So we hope it's going to change for the better, but not lose the elements of human ingenuity, motivation, and desire to succeed.
Now, again, from our the first interview I did with you, in terms of not the first interview, but the last interview I did with you, where you had informed me of these new rules. Have you really seen any reporting on this in the media that targets Black people?
Oh, no. I can't even get Black media to write about crowdfunding. Really, I've tried. I used to have
these new rules, not even with the game-changing ability to help build Black infrastructure.
No, because nobody. Think about it, Scotty. Who else talks about building infrastructure besides me and you, possibly? Who's talking about it? Most people are talking about reparations and buying Black. You're buying, and in most businesses they're buying Black from. It's really they're buying from the Black retail operation, who are sourcing their products from mainstream sources of product sourcing and distribution. They're buying from mainstream people, but they're just getting it and reselling it to you, as a Black business person, which is why they can't compete price wise, and which is why Black business is not viable and as a standalone entity. It's just you're just one more merchant out there, and if you have the goods that people want, people will come to you no matter Black or white. So in terms trying to be, direct people's energies toward buying black, I would say, those businesses that are offering quality products, competitive products, will have a natural following, and what they need to do is just get the word out about what they have. And there can be some positive things that happen with black businesses who fit that description, taking a cooperative effort toward marketing their services and their products. Yeah, that could be positive and work, and it can help build some more infrastructure, the infrastructure of marketing promotions. It can help build that, and you might even be able to go further than that and start manufacturing some products. You might even be able to go to the next level. But in and of itself, it's not the answer. And I think I forget the name of the woman, I'm going to Google it now, who did this study. And from what I can tell, from this study this woman did, her and her husband, let me see, who are they? What they're saying is the same thing. No, that's not it. I'll have to find it. But yeah, they did a whole study. They went a year and tried to buy only from black merchants, and they essentially said, essentially they're saying it's not possible. I mean, you have to go through great, unrealistic hurdles to do that on a regular basis, and it's unrealistic to, anything unrealistic is not going to happen in your day-to-day life. Bottom line, anything that veers away from on your way home, you can stop by the store and get it and go back and go right to the house, is not going to happen as a concerted effort. But could a site develop that has a few quality black product, real black merchants there that are in control of their source of product and their production? Mm-hmm. Could they get through on a marketing basis and become, a resource that people plan for? Absolutely. You think of those grocery direct type things. What more direct? What more, immediate and convenient orientated?
Farmer markets.
I mean, that. Yeah, that's like, wow, if that could work,
Right.
You could absolutely come up with some merchants that are doing something that's really has some value to it and is competitive, and source it directly to people through the internet. Some sort of setup where you're promoting it through the internet, or getting deliveries. However, it's going to work. But the whole notion of buying black in and of itself, in terms of your everyday convenience products, is not something that's going to lead us to promised land.
It's a start, and it has some benefits, but that's not the end. That shouldn't be.
Well, I don't think you need to get people geeked up about it. You need to get people out there and say, look, here's how we can use the internet to bring attention to and market solid, competitive black businesses.
Okay,
that's all you can do. Direct business to them. That's what you can do. And particularly if they're just out there in the marketplace with regular products, but they're doing it a little better, doing it a little different. Clothing, I can see that happening with clothing. I can see that happening, in a number of different ways where we could break out.
Services, a lot of services too, because a lot of people, I struggle living in an 80% predominantly white area, and even finding black businesses, like you say, that I can stop at on my way, wherever when I'm out and about.
That's right.
Yeah. So I do see it being helpful in that terms. But again, the services, just like the products, do have to be quality, or people are not going to become repeat customers. So, I mean, I do see the value in it. But let's take it back, though, to the mission of cultural grassroots. Now, tell people who may not have seen your earlier interviews, and we haven't really talked about it a whole lot, but what is the end game? What's the end game, and how do you leverage these new rules?
The end game with culturalgrassroots.com is to become a full-fledged equity crowdfunding portal.
Crowdfunding portal.
That's right. Portal. That's right. And what that means is that we are qualified and licensed, as it were, to offer products, services and products in the form of businesses to the general public, and in return give them for their money, give them actual ownership interest in these businesses. And that's the end game for what we're trying to do. And when you become a portal, it's simply a place where people go to get support for their ideas, and where people who want to support people with ideas that they support can go and do that. It's a marketplace, really, where it's like, wow, I want to be part of this woman who came up with a new hair care product. It's natural hair care product, and I can help her come up with the startup funds to get her to continue her business, because I think the best businesses, my own opinion, are ones that people have already gotten up and running already. They've already proved they need that $200,000-$300,000 to go to the next level. Those are the best opportunities, I think, out there. So, that person comes to that level and they need $150,000, $200,000 to go. And this is the perfect opportunity, particularly when you're talking about stuff that really has to do with, as I said, the economy of our existence. So if a woman has a natural hair care product, nobody has the natural hair she's talking about is really limited to us.
Right.
So that's something we should have a competitive advantage in over everybody, right?
Right.
L'Oreal should not be able to do that better than us.
Mm-hmm.
Except for, the fact that scientists are scientists, and, but if your political goals are set, we view natural hair as not just a stylistic choice, but as a lifestyle choice, as a representation of lifestyle, right? As a representation of who we are, and the absolute supremacy of that in terms of our personal characteristics and who we are, how we carry ourselves. Yeah, everybody, fashion, yeah, do what you want. But as a lifestyle representation, it's bigger than that. And as such, that becomes a stable quality that has to be, that is manifested in the economy, right? So now you got salons and products and fashion and everything that comes out of that, right? You don't revert back to trying to look like someone else, so now the biggest business in the community, instead of a natural hair salon, is a Korean fake hair nail salon. That's the manifestation of the actual physical manifestation of the difference between the two that we're talking about, in terms of our natural competitive advantage in natural hair versus emulating, the mainstream. You can see it in the infrastructure that develops, right?
So cultural grasp. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just pointing out that that's something that's real, that people can actually put their hands on and say, wow, yeah, that is the difference between all of these Korean state stores that are selling, wigs and hair and all that, versus natural hair salons. People are learning how to style and treat and maintain their own natural hair, and then the styles, the fashion shows that develop out of that, of people who doing natural hair. I mean, I've seen some. I mean, I live in Brooklyn, man. I can tell you, the sisters who are natural, they have come up with so many different iterations and stylistic iterations of the hair, in terms of locks and braids and just twist outs, and it's quite inspiring. And when you look at that, you can tell that there's other stylistic adaptations or innovations that are going to come out of that, just in terms of the clothes you wear, so all of a sudden, your natural inclinations and your natural competitive advantage has sort of grown vertically and horizontally, and you got from hair to clothes to graphic arts to manufacturing, products, to building, to manufacturing boxes to put products in, you know what I mean? To self-driving trucks, a fleet of self-driving trucks to deliver the products, right? To the salespeople who are still on the, still doing business face to face. So, the implications are broad and wide, and for us to look at strategic entrepreneurialism and crowdfunding as our opportunity to engage in strategic entrepreneurialism. It's not going to be the best place to go for every T-shirt business that you come up with a nice slogan on, because number one, you don't make the T-shirts, so you're not really making any money. Number two, well, that's the biggest issue with T-shirts, is that number two is the barriers to entry to T-shirts are so low that there's nothing strategic about it. There's nothing competitive that you have. There's no advantage you have over making T-shirts, right? Do you have an advantage in being in a natural hair salon? A competitive advantage in terms of out of the people? Yeah, you do. Yeah. Do you have a competitive advantage in making film and television and books and theaters plays about the Black experience? Yeah, you should have a competitive advantage over everybody else that wants to make them, except other Black people. And the more of us competing to make those stories, the better we're going to get at it. And we have to start small and build out. Start with web series, and let's get a network of web series, so that every day part has a few web series that are suited for that day part, right?
Right.
Talk shows, how-to shows, the female drama, the young male drama, whatever. So once you get to that level, then all of a sudden you're able, because you've got a steady market of people looking for that stuff. Make it international. We'll include web series from, the African City web series that was so well received. It's a perfect example of stuff that people are growing and are beginning to gravitate towards as a representation of how we live, reality of how we're living. So we can do more of that, and the more we do, the bigger the audience grows for it, and the more the audience grows, the more sophisticated it's going to get.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is about what I'm hearing is cultural grassroots is going to be a marketplace where ideals meet investors. And perhaps I think it'll be more appropriate in light of the adoption of these new SEC rules is to not refer to it as crowdfunding, but crowd investing, to make the distinction, because I still think when people think crowdfunding, they're thinking about, I'm going to give a donation because I'm being altruistic and I just want to help somebody realize their dream, as opposed to, well, I think that's a really great idea that's going to make some money. I want to invest in that. So cultural grassroots is potentially a marketplace for our particular communities, where these and people with ideals meet investors.
That's right. Good way of putting it. Perfect way to put it. Perfect way to put it.
And so is there anything that you would, of course, tell people, how they can get, where are you at right now? I think you're still at the stage where you're just trying to get the 50,000 like-minded people to just register their email. So go ahead and make that pitch.
Yep, that's where we're at. We're still trying to, as I said, our goal is to reach the level of 50,000 registrants. We've been at it now for close to 3 years, and we don't have anywhere near that. The issue, and it's not just about cultural grassroots; it's about Black folks understanding and really honing in, and that means where we get our information from, and those people really have to begin to talk about some of the ideas and the potential and what this represents. And because, people want to hear it from more than one source, and it has to begin to envelope our consciousness. And when that happens, I think that the ideas that we're talking about are going to really jump off, and it will be more widely received. But yeah, go to culturalgrassroots.com. Just simply leave your email and confirm your registration. And when we get, go ahead.
Well, we have some more people join in. I want to address a comment that's in there. Somebody posted a directory of Black-owned banks and credit unions in the USA. But in terms of what we're talking about in crowd investing, how does that relate?
Black-owned banks and credit unions.
Yeah, because I guess in the context of this conversation, perhaps they're saying where we have black banks, black-owned banks, and black-owned credit unions, where potential entrepreneurs can go and seek, investment funds and whatnot. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a game-changing rule rule that has been adopted by the SEC. Could you address that, Mr. Adams?
Yeah. Well, I mean, banks are banks. There's nothing new about banks. We are where we are today, and despite the existence of banks. So I mean, they are what they are. Credit unions, they've had their day, and I think there was some potential there. But one of the big difference with crowdfunding is that it really doesn't limit you to the physical space of your bank in the neighborhood, of your credit union. People keep their savings in places. It's kind of the community that they develop. You know what I mean? So it's part of their community. The internet is a bigger, larger, broader community of people. And you're talking about accessing ideas that are potentially bigger than the local place in which they actually sit. It's about enlarging the larger audience. And
it's about the global marketplace.
Yeah, it's about the global marketplace. And crowdfunding is about the global marketplace. It's about breaking down the barriers to entry, trying to get past some of the things that have been in the way of what we know is a lack of infrastructure on our part. We have not been competitive in America, but simply because we don't have the infrastructure that's focused on on building our competitiveness of our children. It's focused on our children going outside the community and getting a job, and that has left us, with where we're at in this modern day right now. With the dearth of development and the dearth of competitive ability to do the things that are important to our, future existence. This has the potential to change that because we can focus money, we can focus efforts in specific areas that can have the biggest impact on that desire to develop.
It's also tapping into the entire planet. It's tapping into the entire planet as potential investors instead of me just going into a bank where I have to go through a loan officer, where I have to submit to their process and whatnot. But like you said, we use the internet. And the last time I interviewed you, you gave a great example of Oculus, being crowdfunded, this virtual reality headsets. And so what we're talking about is bigger than just, going the traditional routes. Times are changing in terms of how businesses are being funded and how the internet plays into that. And the reason that the SEC is adopting these new rules is because of the success of crowdfunding. But now people want to, instead, like you put it, instead of offering people a T-shirt for investing or donating $5 to my project because they want to see this film get made or they want to see this product come to market, but they don't, they're not going to get a return on that donation. Whereas in terms of other than, they help make something happen. Whereas opposed to these new adoption of these new SEC rules, well, their return would be what any investor would get. It would be a monetary return on that investment. That's why, again, I think we need to change the terminology from crowdfunding to crowd investing, or somehow link the two.
Yeah, I think you can. Well, it's just what took off. Crowd investing. Well, number one, first of all, it well, when it first started, you couldn't invest. Right. So with the change of the rules, it's a perfect time to talk about changing the words to crowd investing as opposed to crowdfunding. In fact, that's a really good argument because we got these new SEC rules, which gives us an opportunity to, make that logical leap to change the name crowd investing, because that's what it is now. That's legitimately what it is now, crowd investing.
Now, we're getting a question, and we're just about to wrap this up. For those who joined us late, of course, we are recording this, and you'll be able to view what you missed later. But somebody is mentioning Bitcoin. Now, I'm not really an expert on that. We do have a program, Tando Radio Show, on blacktalkradionetwork.com that looks at currency, and precious metals and things of that nature. So I'm sure the host of that program is way more qualified than I am. But do you see Bitcoin any kind of way, fitting into this conversation we're having about crowd investing, black business, and entrepreneurship?
Well, what Bitcoin is doing the exact same thing crowdfunding is doing. Bitcoin is breaking down the barriers to the creation of wealth and opportunity. Heretofore, you had to go to Wall Street to raise money, to get money, to circulate money. Bitcoin has blown that completely up in the sense that they've created a currency that is starting to catch on, because it can do nothing if it doesn't catch on with people. Now, as it relates to for black folks as a way of building infrastructure of self-sufficiency. Remember, we aren't trying to separate ourselves from society. We are simply trying to be more competitive as a group, as an identifiable group, because in that nobody can deny we are one nomenclature. Not one in the sense that we're all the same, but we are an identifiable nomenclature, right? And when you say white people, you know what people mean. When you say black people, we know what we mean. And we need an infrastructure of self-sufficiency that allows us to be competitive with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is identifiable, and those identifiable groups are competitive. So we're catching up, and this is and technology is allowing us to catch up. And crowdfunding is one source of one of the tools that we're going to use to catch up. So Bitcoin is similar in terms of breaking down the barriers and allowing us to leapfrog over those gatekeepers. My only concern for our purposes is that it's still small in terms of who accepts it. And I'm just not privy enough to all the ins and outs of how it works to say, yes, we can get in there and create, opportunity for our opportunities to be more competitive amongst ourselves, because it is a blockchain that's connected to every person that's managing the blockchain, right? People are in there and they're actually managing those transactions. They've committed to, doing a certain amount of mining of these Bitcoins, which means you actively have to validate these transactions or invalidate them as they come through. So it's a system of crowd control, which is good, and it seems so far to be, I won't say impervious, but seems to be standing up to human machination so far. So we will see if, in fact, it's another tool for us to get in and then manipulate. But right now, it's so small, and I'm afraid we would be held hostage to the same small group of manipulators that we're trying to get away from, with crowdfunding. So I don't know that we should run to start, converting dollars into Bitcoins right now or buying everything in Bitcoins. I wouldn't. That's not where I'm coming from. But I'm saying that, and who knows, crowdfunding, we probably will have, as a portal, we will have the freedom to either crowdfund a project in Bitcoin or crowdfund it in dollars. I think that's on the table. So we don't need to do a here either or with Bitcoin.
Okay. All right. Well, again, tell people why they should visit culturalgrassroots.com and, more importantly, register on the website.
Visit it because our future depends on it. Our future as a identifiable nomenclature of competitive people, one of the three great races of the world. We are absolutely under a threat of extinction if we don't really get our competitive act in order. The crowdfunding is an opportunity to actually do that, to send a message to our best and brightest that we are here, We want to support you. We want to see projects and we want to see innovation that on our behalf that will make us competitive species, and that we can go on with the rest of the world and create a world where we all benefit and that's beneficial to all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Marlon Adams of culturalgrassroots.com. And I would just like to say to the viewers before you leave, or for those who are watching this later, as we talked about earlier, these new rules that are concerning the Securities Exchange Commission's adaptation of crowdfunding and what we're calling crowd investing, that this isn't really news that is being disseminated through the channels that target Black people. You're not seeing this on TV One or News One, or Mr. Adams said he's had trouble getting Black writers to write about it. You know, Dr. Boyce Watkins, you know, he's kind of built himself up as this financial guru. I've yet to hear him even speak on this, and perhaps give me just a second. Let me close some of these windows. Sorry about that. Somebody's trying to contact me.
This interface is pretty good. I like it.
Yeah, but people, please share this information with your family and friends, because I think it's very important. But I'm sorry, I do have to run, because I have a conference that was scheduled for 3:00, and it's 3:00 on the dot. Thank you again, Mr. Adams. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Scotty.